Michelle, do you want to peek at the questions?
No, I'm good.
No.
I'd rather be surprised.
I'm very excited about our speaker next week. I just locked him down. Sheet.
I got it again.
Thank you, my friend.
Yep.
Who's our microphone guy? Okay, you got to remain seated though. Can you remain seated if you do it? Because you will distract me if you're running around.
But then there's no microphone guy.
Okay, so every single week we have an issue. I cannot figure out the best situation with micro. You can either pass it or you can run around and hand it. What do you guys think? Okay, you can run around and hand it. Okay, try to remain seated though occasionally because I get distracted if you're running around.
Do you guys still do Berkeley time?
We do, which was 4:10.
Yeah, that fucked me up for like life. I'm
Yeah.
chronically 10 minutes late because of Berkeley time.
Yeah, well.
So, just so you know, your bosses in the future won't appreciate it.
We'll start a few minutes late. John, in 5 minutes, can you close that door, please? John, I admire your persistence in coming to every class despite not being registered.
No, I am registered.
Are you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I remember you said to put me in touch with someone. It's on my transcript.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. Okay. All right, 1 minute and we'll start. Guys, if you're looking for a job, I would have reached out to Alex from last week.
Do we have access to your email?
You do not. You have to email me.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right, guys, we're going to get started. So last week, all right, guys, phones away, please. And I can see you when you're on your phones. That side of the room tends to like their phones over here. I always see you guys on your phones. Okay, phones away, please. Computers away. Okay, last week was good, right? Alex was awesome. Very good speaker. I really liked it. Okay, so I said next week we have Steve Croft from the Department of Planetary Sciences and the UC Berkeley Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Very excited he'll be here. The week after that is our last class. Are you guys sad? No? I'm sad. I always get sad when you guys go. And then that last day, I don't think we'll have a speaker. I'm going to do some type of exercise. I heard that you guys already had an impromptu thing where they made you get up on stage and give speeches. Is this correct? Something like that? Okay, we may do something like that. So we'll see. Yeah, okay, but we'll do the NEMA version of it. So we'll do something in here. But our speaker today, I'm extremely excited about it. Michelle is a very, very close friend of mine that I've known for a long time. Very smart, very inspiring what she started on her own, how far she's come, and I'm very excited that she joined us today. She came from New York to be here with us today. So let's give a hand to Michelle. There.
Hello.
Okay, so I forgot to preface this with I tell every speaker in private, which is that longer answers are better instead of short sentence fragments. Okay, so Michelle, welcome. Michelle is the CEO of FindMine. Do you want to tell us about what FindMine does?
Yeah, sure. We're an enterprise software company, and we serve brands and retailers predominantly in fashion, home, and beauty to start. Eventually, we'll serve all of retail. And what we do is we use machine learning like everyone else in the fucking world, which probably should be a question that I can rant about for hours. Anyway, we use machine learning to predict what the merchandisers and marketers, who are people who work within these retail organizations, would produce as content to help guide you with how to use their products. So in fashion, that means how to wear the clothing that you might be looking at in a full outfit in a way that's on brand. So as an example, Adidas is a client of ours. They had merchandisers who were manually putting together outfits to show customers on their website. And because it was manual and they have like 4,000 products in their catalog and the products turn over with some frequency, you can actually like calculate how many permutations and combinations there would be and how much time it would take for a human to manually program an outfit or 3 outfits for every single product. The number is really big. It's a lot of hours. And so from like a cost benefit standpoint, it doesn't make sense for them to have humans do it. But what they found is that customers like us will spend more money when they see a complete outfit rather than just the individual track jacket. So they wanted to do it more often, but didn't know how to do it at scale. And so that's what our technology does. So our predictive intelligence is not what the customer might want to buy. It's actually what the merchandiser might want to show you as an outfit. And in doing that, we make them like 4.5% higher revenue, which for, you know, a $40 billion company, even if we're just doing it on e-commerce, is tens of millions of dollars in upsell. So we work with Adidas, we work with Reebok, we work with Brooks Brothers, Perry Ellis, BCBG, Rag & Bone, a bunch of brands that you've probably heard of. And we're moving beyond fashion into home and beauty as like our next set of categories. Yeah, that's kind of the gist.
So the way you explained it, do you explain it differently to people that are in business versus like people with a technical background, that if you would try to explain it, right? If you were going to keep it simpler for somebody who's in business, how would you explain it versus somebody who comes from like an engineering background, which you actually do like on the back end?
Yeah, so I might not mention how. No one really cares how the sausage is made. So I would emphasize the revenue lift we get, because we get customers to see this content that causes them to change their behavior, so they buy more stuff. We get them to see that content more frequently. So I would focus more on the business case and the ROI rather than like, we use machine learning and it's predictive intelligence and all that stuff. Like, they don't usually care. The whole AI, like as a buzzword thing, can help or hurt depending on who you're talking to. By now, hopefully everyone in here kind of rolls their eyes when they hear like, we use machine learning, like as if it's a differentiator. It is not. It is going to be like saying, in 10 years, it's going to be like saying, we use the internet to do banking. As if that's like, use the internet? What? Like, duh, what else is new? Like, but in the 1990s, like that was a thing. That was like a big deal. And everyone used it as like this marketing advantage. It is absolutely not. And like the savvy people know that. And so depending on who I'm talking to, sometimes if I say machine learning, I get this eye roll and I like lose credibility for having said that. And depending on, other people I'm talking to, they might be like, machine learning, yes, I've been told that's important. Okay, let's like talk, So you have to kind of know your audience a little bit.
I was in the room where this entrepreneur came in. He said, we use machine learning AI to create locally sourced organic food at the point of sale to customers. And nobody knew what that meant. And then somebody walked in and they went, oh, it's a smoothie robot. Hope he doesn't see this clip. But anyway, okay, I have actually a lot of questions about that, about kind of like, using AI and digital transformation, how it works in kind of traditionally non-tech industries. Your background is super interesting, though. Okay, so you started off here at Berkeley, right? You did your undergrad in a kind of non-traditional major. Tell us about what that degree was and how you came about that.
Yeah, I was interdisciplinary studies and Spanish. I was a double major.
Sorry, can everybody hear, by the way? Raise your hand if you can hear. Yeah? Okay.
Cool. Spanish because I wanted to study abroad for a year, and that was the way I got credit towards my major. And then interdisciplinary studies because I was interested in, I was like peace and conflict studies for a minute. I was like a bunch of things. But I took BA 10, which is like the Haas, prerequisite or whatever. And I thought the professor was such an asshole. And I was like, I don't want to be like that. I will never go into business. And I like switched to pass fail, and I skated that line so narrowly just to piss off the professor. I hope he's not watching this clip. I don't even remember his name. But I just was like, ugh, business. That's so like, not Berkeley. I just didn't want to have anything to do with it. But I was interested in like the concepts of like organizational behavior and, creativity and like innovation within large corporations. So I did interdisciplinary studies so I could make my own major. And it was, you have to like write a thesis. They don't just let you make something up. And so my thesis was on managing innovation in multinational organizations. And I took a lot of psychology classes and like linguistics classes. And I looked at how to like motivate people to be creative, to like spur the innovation process, and how that's going to be different if you're in like, a like Eastern culture versus a Western culture. And so it had a lot of applications to business. And then I ended up getting my MBA and like starting a company. So I kind of ended up going the business route anyway. But that was a way to kind of like take some classes that were related to business without having to like be a Haas hole, which I didn't want to do.
I feel like we've been really mean to Haas this entire semester. Yeah, go ahead.
I studied in Barcelona for a year, and then actually I did it twice. Actually, I did it 3 times. Okay, so I grew up like really close to Nima, like 10 minutes away, in like a very sleepy suburb, like 20 minutes away from here. I was born at Altabates Hospital. My whole family went to Cal. So I was like done with the Bay Area. And so between freshman and sophomore year, I did a like one class, or like I think a 3-credit course in Alicante, which is in the south of Spain. And I was like, yes, more of this. And so my junior year, I figured out how to, do it for a full year. And that's why I was like, oh, I should major in Spanish because then I'll get credit for all this stuff. And then I got back from Spain and it was my senior year, and I was here for 6 months, and my husband, who I met at Cal, so he was my boyfriend at the time, had graduated and was going to go play water polo in Australia professionally for 6 months. So I dropped out of school for a semester, and I did that also. PSA for not spending your time at Cal while you're getting a degree from Cal. It's great. It's like a racket.
Anybody else?
Just to follow up on that, do you feel like studying abroad helped you develop skills that you may not have developed had you not studied abroad?
Yeah, I've never thought about it that way. I mean, obviously for like my thesis, it was very valuable because that when I was there, I took classes on like conversational linguistics and how like we learned this really interesting anecdote about if you're Spanish, the polite way to respond to a compliment is to like deny it. So if someone's like, oh my gosh, that dress is so cute, you're like, really? I got it on sale and I look really fat today and I don't really like how it lies. Like, that's polite. And if you're Moroccan, the polite way to respond to a compliment is to agree because you're complimenting the complimenter's good taste. So if they say beautiful dress, you're like, oh yes, thank you, I look fabulous today. So if a Moroccan and a Spanish person compliment each other, like this chaos ensues. It's really funny. And so that was kind of like this whole idea of like the creative process and the innovation process in an organization where like you might tell an employee one thing that's going to work depending on their cultural upbringing, but it could completely backfire if they had another cultural upbringing. So from that perspective, like it was immediately valuable and I was able to apply more than just like the class credit for the Spanish degree. But from like the being like an entrepreneur perspective, I think it was actually, that's the part I've never thought about before, and I think that was actually really valuable because it's fucking hard to live in another country and not know the language and have to like figure out how the post office works in Spain where there's no line or process. You have to go around to everyone who's standing there and say, are you the last one? Are you the last in line? Until you find the last in line and then you become the last in line. And then the next poor sap who walks in has to do the same thing. And like just being thrown into a crazy situation where you don't know what the hell is happening kind of is like being an entrepreneur. And so I think that just like steals you a little bit to like be comfortable living outside your comfort zone.
I would add that it's very interesting what you wrote your thesis on. So you will see this as you, I think, when you graduate, the business of innovation in Silicon Valley, of selling innovation is huge here, right? I swear I cannot tell you how much of what people do here is selling innovation, not just the consultancies, the VCs, the corporations, they're all trying to sell innovation consulting services. In Berkeley, the business school, the law school, the College of Engineering, we do a lot of training on innovation, and this is one of the hardest topics. It is very different, like doing it here versus somebody from another country. Cultural communication is extremely hard to figure out in these ways.
You should read my thesis, Nima.
Yeah, maybe.
That's
okay.
a no.
Okay. so you started off at Berkeley, and you finished your major, and then what did you do after? I came back from Australia for my last 6 months, and that's when I was writing my thesis. And I was working at the Cal Fund, which is like the calling center. I don't think current students get hit up for money, but the second you graduate, you're going to get a lot of phone calls. And that was like last night, yeah.
Yeah, 510-643, any 4 numbers after that, that's the calling center. Yeah. Be nice to them. So I worked there for all 4 years at Cal, and I was like a team leader or something. So when I was like I graduated, I didn't have a job. I was just like, I kept working there, I took on more hours. It was like just below the threshold for where they had to pay me benefits and be full time. So I like bought myself some time to really like decide what I wanted to do. And I got an offer from the AT&T Leadership Development Program, which I hadn't thought about in years until randomly today. And it was a pretty good offer. It was like $57,000. I remember exactly because I make $58,000 now as the CEO. Yeah, it's glamorous lifestyle. And it was just a really cool program because they would like rotate you through the different departments. You got to learn how to climb like telephone poles and like go on site with like field service teams and then like work in all these different functions, and then you kind of like rotated out after 18 months and specialized in something cool. So I thought it was a pretty good opportunity, but it was like, well, it's a big company and I really like this innovation idea and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I wanted to like buy myself time to, that's why the leadership development thing was interesting, but I was like, well, maybe a startup because I can wear a whole bunch of different hats. And so then I also got, I was interviewing in a couple of startups, but there was a Cal alum who worked at this company called Big Tent, which was like a 10-person startup in Soma and in San Francisco. And she posted on a career account, and I applied to it, and I just like really liked the idea that they didn't really know what my job was going to be. And I thought that was awesome because then I could try to do a bunch of stuff. And they matched my offer. So I was choosing between like this giant company, AT&T, and this like tiny startup. And I was like, well, startup, more flexible, like different, experiences. Like I could work on like the privacy policy with the lawyers if I want to go to law school and kind of like have more options open. So I took that role and I worked there for about 3 years. And the role turned into kind of like product management and user experience analysis, which really like laid the groundwork for everything I did after that. So I'm pretty grateful for that role. It was also like a female CEO, female founder, female head of tech, and female board member actually. So like the model of like, hey, maybe I could be an entrepreneur, sort of like that became accessible to me. And I think that's pretty rare. Like there are literally 3 women in this room. So like when you don't see yourself represented, and this is true for like any kind of person who doesn't see themselves represented, whatever their identity might be, it's hard to cast yourself in that role in your mind. And I didn't even realize it. I just was like, I lucked into this job and there was all these women in like badass positions and I didn't really think twice about it. And so it just like put this bug in my, ear about like, oh, I could be an entrepreneur. I could start something. And that was super awesome because, that's definitely not common.
Tip.
What is it that we can do to help inspire other females to pursue entrepreneurship?
Ooh, that is a big question. Definitely like visibility is important. Unconscious bias is a huge factor. There's a woman, Donna Kanzi, who is a PhD at Columbia University, who did her PhD thesis was on the types of questions male and female entrepreneurs get asked. And she found that across the board, female entrepreneurs got asked questions about protecting the downside, and male entrepreneurs got asked questions about how big could this be and how much money can we make together. And regardless of your gender, if you got asked questions by the VC about how big this opportunity could be, you got substantially more funding. Because if you're in this kind of downside protection mindset, you're hedging your bets a little bit. And if you're in this like opportunistic mindset, you want to put more money after that opportunity. And I think one of the reasons that happens, that unconscious bias happens, is that you don't see a lot of female CEOs in Fortune 500 companies, in the media, anywhere. And so if you're confronted with a female CEO, you're just like, I don't know if I can see her going all the way. And that has nothing to do with her, just because you haven't seen someone like her go all the way in all these other places in your life that just kind of sit in this back of your brain. I worked for Univision, which is a Hispanic media company, after business school. And the same thing was true with Hispanics, like Latinos in the media. They were cast as villains, as gangsters, as cleaners, as maids, as like just immigrated to this country and working low-paid jobs and not having papers. And it's all about like, oh, and then I also learned this other thing, which is, you asked me for long answers, so this is your fault.
No, it's good. It's good. It's interesting.
I also learned that, I think my mom told me this, and she's not the most reliable source of information, so this one maybe take with a grain of salt. But she told me that in Brazil, telenovelas, which were like, they're like soap operas, and all the housewives watched them, all the women stayed at home, and they were watching TV a lot. The telenovelas used to have really big budgets, and so the families on the telenovelas reflected Brazilian families, it's Catholic society, lots of kids. And then media budgets got cut, and so the telenovelas started only having 2 kids in the family. And so the women who watched these telenovelas were like, I'm not having any more kids. two's enough, right? Because they were seeing that on television. It was reflected back at them. And it's like art imitates life and vice versa. So they stopped having as many kids, and there was this like drop in the population in Brazil. So all those examples are kind of to say, like, representation is important. So no matter what you do in this room, if you go on to be in a position of power, if you write a television script, put, you know, transgender, gay, Latino, like put people who you don't normally see represented on TV in main roles in those roles. Put women as the CEO. Put, you know, like people who are traditionally others in those protagonist roles. If you work as, you know, if you're promoting people, obviously there's a lot of things you can do around that. If you're hiring people, what we do at our company is we take the names off the resumes for the first screen. It makes a huge difference because then you can't get caught up in that unconscious bias. So I think the biggest thing you can do is like learn about unconscious bias, learn about where it manifests itself, and then take these little things, like taking the names off resumes is really easy. If you're writing a script, there's probably no difference to the story if you cast a black woman in this role versus a white man. If there is, don't do it. Obviously, don't like sacrifice artistic integrity just for the purposes of diversity. But where all else is equal, try to change the representation, because that's, I think, what trickles down and makes the biggest impact in society. Yeah.
Everybody else?
How do we deal tactfully with the issue of representation for the sake of representation? For example, I came to the United States as a refugee when I was like 4.5. So I'm always towing the line between, should I make a bigger deal of this? Should I like tell people that I'm Hispanic and the struggles my family went through to help increase the visibility for other Latinos? Or should I just be myself? You know, sometimes it feels like a burden to try to be that representation. So how do we toe the line? I recognize that I'm also a man. I'm not transgender, for example, or anything like that. So where do we draw the line between like bringing in people and asking them to represent themselves and their community?
I want to quickly jump in and say one thing. That's a very interesting question and a good question. And I like that because, look, these topics are not easy to even ask questions about, because people get offended very easily if you don't phrase questions the correct way. It makes it extremely hard to teach with these subjects because, especially this generation, loves pouncing on it if you say something that, even if you're trying to like have a conversation, if you say it the wrong way. I can tell you it's hard even for me, because one of the requirements that we set for this class was ideally 50% of the people that were presenting were either women or minority or some other underrepresented group, which is what we tried to do this whole time. And you know, that is something that I have to be careful about, like in how I even say it to somebody, right? Because I don't want anybody ever to take their, like, you know, and I have such respect for Michelle and all of our speakers. I never want them to think it's token, like a token speaker, and that's a very delicate thing for me too. And I struggle with the same thing.
Yeah, you're not going to get the magic bullet answer, obviously. I can just answer from my own perspective because it is like the most thorny and like complicated thing, and it's all very individual too. So like I'm a white cisgender woman from an affluent community, and I'm like super fucking lucky that my husband is supportive of me, both financially and from like a, you know, running my business standpoint. And then I had the luxury to kind of like go through my entrepreneurial journey in the way I did, which a lot of people don't have the ability to do at all. And then I have the education that I do, and I have all this access to resources and stuff like that. So like I was kind of, you have to remember that as well, like the places that you are privileged. And then I think that it's sort of an individual decision, but my philosophy is like, I'm going to use it to my advantage wherever I possibly can, because there's all these places that I'm disadvantaged because of the fact that I'm a woman. So like, I'm not going to feel ashamed or bad or whatever about like using that if it's going to get me a leg up. The place that it gets tricky is like being asked to speak on panels, being asked to do all these like things, if there's fewer of people like me in tech, and then there's quotas and stuff like 50% women, the women who exist in tech or whatever that space is are getting asked a lot more frequently than the men to do these things, which is taking us away from running our business. So at a certain point, you have to kind of make a call and say, I'm cutting off how much I'm going to give back. I'm cutting off how much I'm going to do or how much I'm going to give of myself to be the representation, to get out there and just like be visible, because otherwise my job's not going to get done. Like, I'm not going to accomplish my goals, and then I'm not going to be visible in a different way. So you just have to draw those lines individually. But I think that not taking an opportunity or not capitalizing on these programs that even sometimes when we're misguided, that have their hearts in the right place to try to level the playing field, because you don't want to participate in tokenism, or because you don't, you want to have an unfair advantage or whatever. For me, that feels like I'm already disadvantaged in a lot of ways that I can't control, and this is one way that I can. Why not take advantage of it? So I don't know if that really helps answer your question for your specific situation. It certainly doesn't solve the problem overall, but that's the kind of like mental gymnastics I think you have to do. And then from like the, trying to get fair representation and stuff, I think it's a bold goal, but I think also you want to recognize that you might get a lot more no's from the women you ask, or the people who are in the kind of the minority camp that you ask, because they're getting hit up a lot more frequently now. And so you might not end up meeting that goal. But I think asking the question is the most important part, like trying to get to parity, and then if you fall short, that's okay. Versus, especially because you're recognizing why you're falling short, right? Like, these people have other things that they need to do, and they have to work 10 times harder than their kind of more privileged peer. And then if you're making that a little bit extra hard by putting something else on their plate, like, you want to be respectful of that. But I think that the thing that really pisses me off is when people are trying to program a panel and it's all men, and they say, well, we can't find the women. Like, where are they? It's like, okay, work a little harder. Like, you have to at least ask the question. If you ask 10 women, you got turned down 10 times, fair enough. But if you didn't even like reach out to 50-50 or 75% women and 25% men in your outreach, then you're really just being lazy.
Everybody else? It's interesting. We briefly touched on this topic with Layla, our very first speaker, but I don't think we've come back to it since. Okay, so going back to the startup you worked at, what was your actual role there, by the way?
I made up my title. They didn't have a title for me. They said I could make it up. So I worked there for a couple of months, and then I was like, how about user experience analyst?
Okay.
So that was the role I made up.
Okay, and I'm going to out you a little bit here. You were also an actress.
Yeah.
Okay, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so you don't have my reel ready to play?
No, I
okay,
thought
good.
about it, yeah.
I would literally kill you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't like study acting at Cal. I took theater 101 or something like that while I was here. But I was interested in it, and I had done a little bit of drama and stuff in high school. And then I joined like a private acting conservancy in San Francisco during my like last semester at Cal, and was like, oh, this is interesting. I want to like pursue this. And so I was doing it part-time kind of while I was working at the startup in San Francisco. There's not really like a strong enough entertainment scene up here to like sustain it full-time, but I got some like minor commercials and print work and things like that. And then I decided that I wanted to either like become a full-time actress or go to business school, and I wanted to figure out which one I wanted to do. So I moved to LA for a year and was full-time focused on acting, but then, so it kind of flipped, like full-time focused on acting, but then the startup became my side hustle, and they let me like take my laptop and just work remotely, I was also very fortunate that they did that. And I was applying to business school at the same time. So I was like using that year to decide what I wanted to do.
Okay. And so then the decision to go to business school, was it to figure out what you wanted to do? Was it to be an entrepreneur? Or was
No,
it...
so I actually, I decided that I liked the entertainment industry, but I didn't actually like the craft of acting. Like, the part that I liked the most about it was sort of like the marketing and positioning and like strategy, and that was all the business stuff. And normally actors hate that. Like they're the least interesting part of what they do is like marketing themselves. And that was the most interesting part. So I was like, that's a good signal. I'm probably not cut out to go through this like 10-year plus slog of trying to make it as an actress if I don't love the actual like acting itself. So then I went to business school with the idea that I would study entertainment. So I only applied to like UCLA, Columbia, and Stern because I wanted to be New York or LA and focus on the business of entertainment.
Okay. And so at Stern, that's how Michelle and I met, we went to graduate school together. You ended up joining Univision. Can you talk about, what that role entailed, how you decided to get that job, and why you decided to go into the corporate world? Because I know later on you discussed that you had the idea for the startup for quite a while, right? And you were essentially, I don't know if you were sitting on the idea, you were waiting to start it. What was the decision to go to the corporate world? Like, how'd you make that?
Yeah, so at Stern, like, first of all, in business school, you don't have to major in anything. Like, you can have a concentration, and sometimes you just, like, end up with one because you took, 9 credits in a certain field. It's like, ended up with a finance concentration, but, like, certainly did not earn that from, like, any other standpoint. I just Stern's strong in finance, so I took a lot of finance classes because I was interested in them, and the professors were amazing. But I did intentionally focus on entertainment, which at Stern was bundled with media and technology. So that was like a whole kind of like, like package deal, I guess, which actually worked out for the best because I got the technology piece of it. But then my role at Univision was in corporate strategy, and a girl who had been like a year ahead of us at Stern had joined. So the chief of staff to the new CEO was forming like a little internal consulting team, and she had joined that. So she was the first person from Stern to join, and like one of the first people on that team. And then she set up the recruiting pipeline back to Stern, and then another mutual friend of ours got a job there too, and so we were 2 people who joined that team. And I think, I wanted to get into media. I had this Spanish degree that I was like sitting on, so that actually came back to work in my favor. And I had student loans. I was like, I need a real salary. I need to pay back these loans that, I don't want hanging over my head if I'm going to go start something. I'd also never worked in a corporation, and I really wanted to get that experience and see what it was like. And yeah, I think that like some of you guys said you wanted to be entrepreneurs. We can talk about that later. I'll probably try to talk you out of it. But yeah, like Berkeley's fucking cheap. You guys are lucky, unless anyone's out of state, and then I'm sorry. But like a lot of people graduate undergrad with a ton of loans. And then if you go to grad school, it just compounds. And it's really hard to like breathe when you have that weight hanging over your shoulders. So I left Cal. I didn't have any loans at all. I think it was $2,500 a semester, like when I left, and that was like the highest that had got. It's gone up since then. This is why you get calls to donate. And only like 10% of the funding for Cal is provided, maybe like less than that, 5%. It's some nominal amount that's provided by the state of California, and the only reason that Cal continues to take that money is because they want to remain a public institution. There's a lot of like negative things that happen when you're purely private. They want to be for the people, but really from a money standpoint, 90+% of their funding comes from alumni, comes from donors, comes from other people. So they like have to operate like a private school almost from like an endowment fundraising perspective in order to just pay the bills. And a lot of people are like, oh, it's a public school, it's fine, it doesn't need my money. So PSA, tell all your friends, make sure you donate. But the point is I graduated without any debt from Cal, which then when I went to business school, and I fortunately got a bit of a scholarship too, and I had some money saved, my loan debt wasn't as high as some other peers who didn't have that, or were like lumping on like Notre Dame salary on top of that. No offense to Notre Dame. It's a good school, but it's expensive. So that, I think, was not the main reason, but one of the reasons I went to Univision, and it's also one of the reasons I was able to start my company only a few years after school, because I paid off that debt.
Okay, so when did you first come up with the idea for your company then? Were you at Univision still?
No, it was the business plan competition the first year of Stern.
Okay.
So in 2010.
How did you identify like the business challenge, right? I've differentiated a lot in here versus creating technologies versus like a business solution. How did you identify a business challenge or like a problem statement? And then what was the first step there, and then figuring out the tech that went behind it?
Yeah, I think the most important insight I've honestly had, maybe overall, in this like entrepreneurial journey is the problem is the only thing that matters. And the problem was the only thing that didn't change from 2010 to 2014 when we incorporated to 2016 when we launched to now. It has not changed. And the problem was kind of a selfish problem, like I was trying to solve my own problem. You are sold as a consumer, you're sold products individually, but you never use them individually. And then there's this lack of help with what to do next. So I'm sold this turtleneck. I can't wear this with no pants and no shoes. That's a fail. What pants and shoes should I wear with it is a logical question that I have to solve. And that caused a point of friction for me in my life as a consumer. So my initial idea for the business plan competition, which is not novel at all because it's literally in a movie that everyone has seen. It's like the app that helps you figure out what to wear based on what you have in your closet. It's the Clueless closet idea. If you've seen Clueless, she literally goes to her closet and punches in what she wants to wear, and it will show her what's a match and what's a mismatch. So it was kind of like that idea. And so I entered the business plan competition, and it's Stern, so the competition starts in September. We started in August. So it was day 5 or something. You're supposed to get together your business plan and enter this competition that runs the entire year, in addition to all the other stuff you do in business school. And so I think that was the big thing that was I didn't like that idea enough to sacrifice all the other fun things about being in business school, like partying a lot and networking and joining all these clubs and exploring all these different career paths and recruiting, because you kind of have to give that up if you're really committed to this business plan competition. And then I also found that Apple had a patent to do something similar, and I was like, oh, Apple's already doing it. Okay, game over, there's nothing here to do, which I've learned is such a stupid reason to quit. But I was kind of looking for reasons to quit. It really wasn't, my heart wasn't in it because the solution to the problem that I had identified was not compelling. The problem was still really interesting, and so that kept cropping up again and again. So in Oaken's business plan practicum class, that's the problem I tried to solve when I was quitting my job because I was just fed up with my job at Univision. This was high on the list of problems to solve. I actually started with a different idea, and then 2 or 3 weeks later after starting to work on that, had a change of heart and then went back to this problem because it just kept gnawing away at me and keeping me up at night. And I'm so lucky that happened for 4 to 6 years before I really launched the company, because if I just picked an idea that fell out of the sky and just occurred to me, there wouldn't be enough juice there to keep me going when times are really hard. And I know a lot of people who have a great idea and then they start it, but then they lose interest in it, and you're dead in the water if that happens. This is such a long journey. It's so painful. You have to be obsessed with the problem that you're solving in order to keep going, because there's just not enough. There's not enough good stuff that happens as an entrepreneur until the very fucking end for you to keep going. So you have to be motivated intrinsically by the work you're doing. It's literally the same thing as when I was trying to be an actress. People who love the craft of acting, that's what keeps them going. They love it so much that they don't care that they get rejected and they're still not making any money and no one knows their name and they can't find an agent and whatever. And yes, there's an eventual pot of gold at the end of the rainbow if you get there, but they're obsessed with the craft of acting enough to carry them through. And I wasn't. But I'm obsessed with the problem that we're solving enough that matters. And if I had stuck with this original idea, I probably would have quit before we'd even gotten started.
What was the original idea?
It was basically ClassPass before ClassPass existed, but for beauty and hair care and waxing appointments, because those people are working whether or not someone shows up and takes the appointment. So it was making use of unused inventory with massages and haircuts and things like that, so you could get a heavily discounted one and it would match you up and do some dynamic pricing until the last minute, and then that either was sold or it wouldn't sell, but it would help kind of sell these unused beauty appointments.
Okay. Question?
Have you ever been a private business into beauty and cosmetic products? What does an outfit look like there?
Yeah, so it's lipstick with the blush, with the eyeshadow, with the eyeliner. You have a daytime look, you can have a nighttime look, And then within beauty, where it's not, so cosmetics are like makeup, and then beauty is like skincare, hair care, those kinds of products. And so like there's like an anti-aging kind of regimen, and certain ingredients will counteract each other. So you're not supposed to use a vitamin C serum with a retinol, for example, because chemically those will kind of counteract each other, and then you might as well have just set your money on fire. So being able to kind of like bundle those things dynamically to give you like a little regimen or a recipe like a skincare consultant would tell you. Yeah.
These are, I'll get to you two in a second. It's interesting. We don't have a lot of exposure to like luxury and retail at Berkeley. I really don't think we do at all.
Yeah.
But in New York, NYU, other parts, it's huge business.
Yeah.
Huge.
And all those companies are located there, or they're located
They're
in
all
Paris.
there. Yeah, and so we don't have exposure to like how many people are recruiting for these positions.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, how does the program actually go about like piecing together an outfit? Is it based off what people are buying, or is it based off kind of like some algorithm you came up with?
Yeah, so that's where the why I said the problem is so important. So we're kind of like designing a category that people don't know about yet, and there's a book I'm reading right now that's really good about category design. It's called Play Bigger, and it's about how like, you know, the biggest companies, the most successful companies of our era have kind of identified a problem people didn't know they had, and then peeled back the curtain and showed them they had this problem. They're like, holy crap. And then you can't unsee the problem. And so for us, personalization as a trend within retail means that it's going to take you and build a little demographic profile of you and say, okay, you and you are similar. And you bought all this stuff. So we're going to show you all that stuff. And there's two problems with that. One is that you might have bought 4 pairs of pants, but you're not wearing 4 pairs of pants, no shirt, no shoes. So trying to think that the basket data is telling you a signal for how you're planning to use those products it's all noise. That's the wrong source of information. The second problem is that neither of you, no offense, are probably very stylish, right? There's like a distribution curve of style. You're normal guys, it seems. And let's say you're shopping at, do you guys know who John Varvatos is? Or John Varvatos, they're a brand. It's like a luxury brand. To your point, it's much more of like a New York thing. How about Original Penguin? Some people. Brooks Brothers? Okay, Brooks Brothers. It's like, so Brooks Brothers is the people at Brooks Brothers, the designers, probably are more stylish than you. Do you agree with that? Right. Because they work in fashion. Like they built their whole business and career around being stylish people. So if we're using personalization data to show you good style, a good outfit, we're going to give you a middle of the bell curve outfit. It's not going to be great. It's going to be like a normal guy outfit. And one of the reasons you're probably shopping at Brooks Brothers is like you think their stuff is stylish. So why shouldn't their point of view about style come through? Because that's a differentiator. And if their point of view about style is the same as the other suit makers, right? All the different places you could buy a suit, then what are they competing on? Price? That's kind of it. So that's a race to the bottom. So what we can do for the individual brands we work with is help them carve out a competitive differentiator using their style expertise to guide you with information that's more sophisticated than just what the other guy who's like you bought. And that's a new category. It's not personalization. It's this thing where we're scaling the brand's unique expertise. And so we have to come up with a whole new vocabulary for that and like explain to people until they get to that aha moment where they're like, oh, right, like if I'm resorting to the wisdom of the crowds to try to provide style guidance to my customer, I'm whiffing on this huge potential competitive advantage I have against the other, suit guy that you guys could go to if the price was cheaper, but you probably won't go there if the Brooks Brothers has a better point of view on style. Does that help answer your question?
A little hurt,
No offense. I mean, that's why I started the company. Like, I have to insult myself every time I tell the founding story because I don't have a good sense of style. Or, I have a good enough sense of style, but it's certainly not the sense of style that, Christian Dior has. And, it's aspirational. Like, I want to look like that girl. So help me get there. And that's, Yeah, so I always have to kind of reveal that, like, I'm not a fashionista. I'm not a good interior decorator. I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to makeup. I renovated my apartment, and it was the most confusing fucking thing in the world because I don't know how trims and like valves fit together for the bathroom like faucet, and I have to learn all that stuff. Well, guess what? Like, Dior is better at style than me, and Crate and Barrel is better at interior design than me, and Estee Lauder is better at makeup than me, and Home Depot is better at home improvement than me. So why isn't that information getting to me as a consumer? And it's because personalization is just showing me what I'm likely to buy, and I'm likely to buy stuff that's not that great because I'm not an expert in those things. So that was a real aha moment for us.
Hey, Oliver,
Oh.
was it you?
Okay.
Tim.
You mentioned you were going to discourage us from pursuing entrepreneurship. The question is, what's your metric of life success, and why hasn't entrepreneurship hit that metric?
My metric of success, like in
Just life success.
life success.
Surprising how often we get that question. You guys have asked me that, and I got that question yesterday at work from somebody too. That's a hard question to answer.
You guys are like philosophers. Like, all these questions are very like
Esoteric.
Yeah, they're esoteric, but they're like life's burning questions. It's actually really cool. So my husband likes to remind me of this all the time when I come home and I'm super frustrated. That at one point I had said that all I wanted was not to be a wantrepreneur. Have you guys heard that? It basically means a wannabe entrepreneur, where like you're sort of playing startup, but you haven't really launched anything. You're not really doing it. And there's a lot of people I know who are like that. They'll talk about their startup, and it's really only them, and they really never have a product, and they really never have a customer, and they really never got investment, and they really never got anything off the ground, but they still talk about it as if it's this, as if they're playing the same game as everyone else. And I didn't want that to be me. I wanted to like get it off the ground. I wanted to raise like $1 in venture capital financing. I wanted to have like a real customer. I wanted to like actually have a product that was in market doing something. And we're way past that. I did all those things, and now I'm like, yeah, but the next goal is out here. And my husband just like beats me up for this because it's so hard to not move the goalpost on yourself all the time. So for me, like, the venture community and like the Silicon Valley kind of like, I don't know, spin on things is like billion-dollar company, like unicorn or bust, right? I have a t-shirt that I got for free from some swag bag that it was at some event. Sidebar, 70% of the average tech worker in Silicon Valley's wardrobe is free swag. So anyway, I have a free t-shirt from Draper University, which is Tim Draper's sort of like, I don't know, education thing to help people understand how to be entrepreneurs. And it says IPO or die trying. And I leave it in Orinda, which is where my parents are, because like I don't want to bring all my pajamas every time I come visit. So it's like in my pajama stuff in Orinda. And so every time I come home, I like wear this t-shirt and I'm like kind of feeling a little gross about myself. So anyway, that's kind of like, that's one metric of success for sure. But then I think there's also a lot of places along the way that I would be satisfied with what I've accomplished. But I go back and forth on whether that's true. And I also don't think that I would be super happy if we IPO'd. Like, being a public company CEO would suck. I think there's a lot of like psychological torment that comes with privilege and power and notoriety and money. And yeah, so I don't even think I'd be happy then. And sometimes I think if I just like everything fell apart right now, I would be very satisfied because of how much I learned. I actually like employed 30 people over the course of several years. We made a technology that made hundreds of millions of dollars of difference in an industry where that industry is dying. And like, you can't take away all the scars and war wounds and things. And like the next thing I do, I'm going to be that much better at. And I've also learned, like, I've just gotten so much more confidence that it's hard to take away, because if you're starting a company that's brand new, nobody knows the answer. Otherwise, they would have started it and been successful already. So like, your guess is as good as anybody else's, and that's so empowering. But the reason I would say, like, the reason I said I was going to discourage you guys from being an entrepreneur is that, like, if you're not obsessed with that idea, it's not enough. So if you can quit whatever idea you have, do it. And if you just cannot fucking quit the idea, then there's something there. Then that's worthwhile. But all the other stuff is like, you know, it's not glamorous, it's really hard, you're probably going to fail, it's going to take years off your life, it's going to put strain on your relationships and your finances. Like, there's so many reasons not to do it, that if you just can do anything else in the world, do that instead. And if you really can't, then absolutely go for it. But that's why my first piece of advice is always, you know, around people who want to get into entrepreneurship is don't do it. Because you won't listen to me if you really, really believe in what you're doing.
I guess from what I heard from you, it seems like all your metrics are constrained around entrepreneurship. So if you were to just say, all right, I'm not going to do entrepreneurship, then what would your metrics be?
For success in life, you mean? Yeah, I realized that I didn't quite answer your question in the way that you phrased it. I'm like a really intellectually curious person. So I think just like always like indulging that in some way I wouldn't be happy if I couldn't do that. And entrepreneurship definitely gives me that. Like what I'm doing now definitely gives me that. So that's great. And then from like a relationship standpoint, just making sure like family always comes first and like my life comes first. I think that's super important. And we have a culture at our office that's like very autonomous because we want people to be able to have like, to be there for their kids, you know, school recital or take care of an elderly parent or go to yoga in the middle of the day because that's when the good class is. And then you just figure out how to get your work done around like how you live your life. So that as a value is what makes me happy, and the things that run counter to that make me unhappy. And if I can design my life in a way where I can like go to the good yoga class and like, you know, do the workout, the dance class that I want to do, and like go on the vacation that I want because my family's all going to be in Hawaii this week and we're celebrating the fact that my mother-in-law is in remission from cancer. You know, who knows how long that's going to last. Like, I want to be there for those things. So I think that those are kind of the big two, like values-based criteria of success. And if I can do those, I'm happy. And then from like a financial perspective, I want to be able to kind of say yes to the cool opportunities like around travel and things like that. I don't think I ever want to have so much money that like, is it Ed Sheeran who just came out with that song, Beautiful People? Like front row at fashion shows and what do you do and who do you know and prenups and broken homes. Like, I don't want that. I think that he hit on something really interesting there, which is like, there's a point at which for me it'll be enough. And I don't need that extra because it comes with a whole side of drama that I'm not interested in. Yeah. I feel like I'm in my like therapist's office or something. That was a very deep question.
John.
Before I ask my question, I just want to say it's awesome that you say that you're a super curious person. I think you're the third entrepreneur who has told me that same exact thing within the past couple weeks as a super curious person. And I'd like to not say entrepreneur, but at the moment, categorized as an entrepreneur. Super inspiring to get at. My question is, I was actually going to ask the same exact question as Tim, so I'll pivot. And I want to know, you say that like, from what I'm getting, it's kind of like pursue entrepreneurship out of necessity, not desire. It's like, it's just such a burning question that you feel like you are the person to do this, which I totally agree with. So with that in mind, I'm wondering, beyond that, what have been the things that have gotten you through, I'm sure, the countless hardships that entrepreneurship has caused you to face, and like how have you maintained a positive mindset throughout this entire process?
Yeah, great question. I think also I want to like add a little asterisk to my earlier comment. So like me saying just don't do it is my blanket statement for like, don't do it if at all possible, and if you can't help but not, then do it. And if you can't help but not, there's a couple reasons why. One is you believe with such conviction in the thing that you're doing and you're a little crazy about it. But the other one actually is it's a personality thing. And I don't know if it's like healthy to recommend people going into entrepreneurship for that reason. But there are certain people who have, like, because of their circumstances growing up or whatever, have this chip on their shoulder where they absolutely have to be an entrepreneur. And it's not about the idea. It's about them as the leader, as the entrepreneur. I don't want to work for anyone else. the I don't want to work for anyone else is a terrible reason to start a company. So if that's your motivator, do anything but start a company, because you have so many more bosses when you're a founder than you do if you do anything else. Your customers are your boss, your employees are your boss, your investors are your boss, your potential investors are your boss, everyone's your boss, and it sucks. And a lot of people kind of get into it thinking that they're going to call all the shots, and then they're like, this is not what I signed up for. But the other personality traits, like if those are really compelling to you, and you just like had a dad who was such a jerk and he told you you're never going to be anything, and that's like part of your growing up story, and you just have to prove the world wrong, that's enough of a motivator, regardless of what the idea is. So I think you just have to be really critical about your own motivations to do that. So anyway, circling back to your question, for me personally, what keeps me going is like there's always, this might be a bad thing, but there's always something, some feedback that we're on the right track. And it's just like a little bit of a dangle of something that's like enough to be like, okay, like let's put in some more investment and time and money and like go that little bit further. And it all could end up being just a big cosmic joke, but there's always been like a little bit of enough of something that's validating to get to the next milestone. And then also like the support from my family and friends and company, and like within the company, and also our customers. Like the fact that we're actually seeing the metrics and the benefit of what our technology has done for them and how it's changed their lives basically as employees, and their company trajectory from like a revenue standpoint is really validating and very like, it makes it about more than just like me and my goals. And so just reminding myself of that. And then also looking back at like what we've done, where we've come from, and going back to like remind myself that when I set out to do this, I started with this goal in mind, and we've blown past that. And that's amazing. And it's hard to do that, but the more often I do, the better my mental health is. And then also exercise. Like the moment I feel just like shitty about life, if I go work out, everything feels better. It's always worth it. Even if I'm on a deadline and I'm like stuck, and I feel like the only thing that I can get that will get me through this is to just work harder, that's the moment you have to stop and go work out. Or at least I have to stop and go work out. And then, yeah, it's better.
Have you had to deal with Apple patents or any other competitors trying to do similar things to you?
The Apple one specifically, no, because we're not doing like anything remotely close to that. I think even if we were, it wouldn't matter. Like patents are sort of this weird sword and shield, but like there's a diminishing competitive advantage. Anything with machine learning or data science or like big data, the data itself is the accelerating competitive advantage. So the more you process, the more at-bats you get, the better your engine, the more of the feedback loop you're running, the harder you are to catch. And that grows over time. The value of a patent decreases over time. We've had one patent troll like reach out and claim that it was like just an absurd claim that somehow we were infringing because of a previous job they had pitched the company that I had worked at the same time that I had been there, and it was vaguely similar. Turns out they were just fishing for money, and they were running out of money, and they were shooting in the dark to see, like it was a spray and pray approach to see if they could get anyone to pay them to license their technology. We sent a letter and said, we have no idea what we're talking about, this is frivolous, and they went away. But then competitors is like a whole other category. And I think on one hand we have none, because we created this new category that didn't exist before, which is amazing because you get to play by your own rules, and then you're obviously the leader because you set up the game. The new entrants will definitely come in. We're just not at that phase of the kind of Gartner hype cycle, if you will, of what we're doing. But there's a ton of perceived competitors, and that's almost harder because people will be like, oh, we already have personalization, like we don't need to take a meeting. We're cool there. And then I have to kind of explain to them what I explained to you guys until they get that light bulb, and then we might be able to work our way back in. But you don't really have the time to explain that over a cold email. So like our outreach channels to potential customers are somewhat limited by our place in the category, perceived competition, and then like, just the industry understanding of what we do as a topic. So basically we have no competitors and tons of competitors, and it's a very weird, like schizophrenic place to be. And none of it has to do with IP or patents or anything like that. It's all much more blocking and tackling and like kind of day-to-day differentiation and trying to like educate the industry and stuff like that. And no one really cares that you have a patent for what you do.
I will add one thing to this. Michelle's talk has been especially interesting because you've spoken a lot more about your customers than any other of the founders we've had here. Yeah, no, it's a good thing because I think that there is a misconception, especially when I was an undergrad, that like if you build it, they will come. If you build something cool, people will want it. That is not the case. That is not the case. You have no idea whether they will like it. You have no idea how similar other things are out there. No matter how much research you do, you'll have to pivot a zillion times and you still won't know if people will like it. And so I think, yeah, I mean,
there's a lot of that in Silicon Valley, I think, like tech for tech's sake.
Yeah.
And I don't think it ever works in the long run. I mean, there's so many like Twilio, ask your developer, right? Like dev tools and things like that. And that's important because this is the infrastructure layer. And we're in a moment in time in like technology advancement where we're still building that layer. But eventually that's, you're not going to be able to just sell to other developers. And so you're going to have to look beyond your own navel. And Silicon Valley is really bad at that. Yeah?
Kind of building off of that a little bit. Like, how did you find e-commerce? What motivated you to want to solve this problem? It's something that I've been thinking a lot about is like what sector I want to work in, what problems I want to work on, and that's something that I've found to be very hard. So like, are you motivated by the fashion side of it? Are you motivated by the value add that you provide to these companies? Like, what really motivated you in the e-commerce?
Yeah, I never set out thinking about the industry. It was really just the kernel of the problem. Like as a consumer, I faced this challenge. And having been kind of in product management, my previous, 10 years or whatever of my career, like friction and a user experience, I was very hyper attuned to, and I know how to fix those problems. So I was like, I wonder if anyone else experiences this friction. It turns out everybody does. That was like a big indicator. And then the way to solve it happened to be by going direct to the brand and retailer. So I ended up in the retail industry, even though that wasn't like the industry I was trying to disrupt or whatever. It was just the means to the end to fix the problem. And I don't think I would have chosen it knowing what I know now if I was to choose the industry that I was going into. It's pretty broken in a lot of ways. And then we actually don't just serve e-commerce, we're like an omni-channel technology. So we have applications for stores, the store associates, iPads, for like marketing channels, for customer care, call centers and stuff like that. E-com being the thing that's the fastest growing within the retail industry, and also where like a lot more of the tech talent goes, that ends up being where we get pulled the most. But yeah, it's definitely not just an e-commerce technology.
So, like, would it be fair to characterize your motivation as like really empathetic? Like, is that like?
Yeah, I think that's a good word for sure. I mean, I think that we worked backward from the problem. And then there's two places we have a lot of empathy. One is for the consumer, which I explained already, and then one is for the retailer, because it is a pretty broken industry in a lot of ways. And some of the things they do are just bananas. Like the people who work in those organizations, it's not easy. They have to do a lot of things manually with very little resources and very little technology help. And then they can't do their jobs as well, and that sucks. It's frustrating. And so approaching it from like a user-centric mindset, I think, is a big differentiator, and probably one of the reasons I talk about our customers all the time, because I came from a product background. My CTO was one of the first people to work on the Lean Startup methodology. Have you guys heard of Lean Startup? So he worked at IMView with Eric Ries, and then he was the CTO of a startup that had a beautiful technology that nobody wanted to use. So like he's learned the lesson the hard way, and I think we've infused that into our culture almost to a fault, where our engineers are so worried about the customer impact that they'll make decisions that go like almost overboard. They're going for 100% out of 100 when you'll get an A if you get a 95. And I'm like, hey guys, like let's not kill ourselves. We could use the resources that you're trying to dedicate to get the 100 out of 100 over here instead, still get the A, get the credit with the customer, and I have to like pull them back. And having worked in multiple engineering organizations, normally you have to like beat developers until they understand the client need and have the empathy for the client, because they're just completely siloed from it. So I think it's an amazing thing, and it's also like maybe too far, but it's also a competitive advantage that we want to kind of scale up.
I've become much more interested in this concept of a problem statement as the starting point. I think just in the last year, for me, has become something in a lot of the different classes. I just did a data science class for Mitsubishi, where that was like the core thing I was starting out with, like data for what problem statement
Right.
are you solving?
Yeah, I spoke on a panel for Intel on artificial intelligence, and it was like really interesting. They had Intel customers from all different sectors, like agriculture, like people who were like basically farmers, but like farmers who use data in the room. And so the understanding of AI was really low, but people had heard about it, like what should we do here? And my biggest takeaway for the room was AI is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. And if you think it's like a box to check or a thing to implement without starting from the problem or the why first, you're just going to blow through a bunch of money.
Yeah.
So like, what is the thing that you're trying to solve, and work backward from that? And maybe AI is the way to solve it, and maybe it's not. And a lot of times within our own company, we'll be like, yeah, we can throw 4 people at that problem, and do it cheaper and faster than if we built the machine learning model to do it. And we'd rather protect this person's time for this other project that's higher priority, so throw bodies at it. It's like a trade-off, and the tech isn't always the right solution.
Yeah, I realize the problem statement side topic, which you guys probably know by now, that I'm most is in my head, that I'm thinking about the most often, is you guys and other people finding your career paths. It's something I've been obsessed with for a long time.
Yeah.
You remember this was something I've been talking about for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I still haven't figured out exactly what the solution is here, besides talking to you one-on-one. But that I know for me, like if anything I'm going to do as a startup founder in the future, it's going to be something along these lines.
Yeah.
How do you guys get proper experience? And because LinkedIn sucks. LinkedIn is terrible. It's terrible. Like, what are you guys going to do on LinkedIn to figure out what you really want to do? I just don't think it's cutting it. But I don't know quite what the answer is yet.
Yeah, but that's great, because the longer you obsess and mull over the problem, the closer you'll get to the place you need to go, and the more you'll learn that when is the tipping point where there's enough conviction behind that problem that you're just going to go fix it.
Yeah, I mean, one-on-one, I figured out how to do it with you guys. I can always drill down into why you've made the choices you've made, like working backwards and then working forwards, but I haven't found, you remember my idea, but a tech solution that really
that
nails
scales
this.
that up.
Yeah.
To keep building on the why, one thing I noticed at the beginning, when you were describing the company to us, is you started with the value add to your clients, like the different passionate lines and stuff. And so, I guess, how do you balance the motivation of adding value to your clients versus working on this problem that you're really passionate about, and obviously you need both, and so how do you juggle those?
Well, now I think they're really aligned. So solving the problem for the end consumer means solving the problem for the retailer, which gives them this value. And all of those things are kind of a package deal at this point. So every dollar and every hour and every person we invest in fixing the consumer challenge or the retailer's challenge is directly related to the value add. So we don't have to make a choice between those two. But in a previous iteration of the company, our idea was to solve the consumer challenge. This was before we were kind of direct to retailer, with a bookmarklet that you could click on any website that you were on, and it would show you, if it's a fashion product, how to wear it. And we found this huge technological barrier, basically, to when you click a button on a website, how does the technology understand what you're looking at? And is it, a cooking blog, or is it Forever 21 and it's a skirt? Telling the difference between those two things is kind of as yet insurmounted. Unsurmounted? I have pregnancy brain, sorry. It's an unsolved problem in technology to have a computer detect exactly what is on this page. That's what Google does. And they do an okay job at it to help you rank based on search results, but they actually can't tell you that this is a blue skirt with these colors, and it's like this subcategory of fashion. Because the way Forever 21 describes it might be different than the way the next site describes it. So, and Google is a much bigger company with way more resources than us. And this was the problem, this was the part of the process that we had to use as the means to the end, which was show a recommendation for the outfit. We had to figure out if it was a skirt first and then be able to show it. So we ended up spending all of our time trying to solve this problem that wasn't even like the thing that added the value. And so we realized that if that's the case, we're either going to have to ask the customer what this product is, which adds to friction, which means fewer people will follow through with the funnel, or we're going to have to invest all this technology in the thing that's not really even our core competency, just to do what our core competency is. And so that misalignment was a really big cue that there was something broken about the model and that we should change it. And that's when we decided we're going to go directly to the retailer, where their information as a source of what the product is much more accurate, and it has it's less noisy. There's much more signal there. Still have some challenges sometimes, determining what the products are from their data set, but it's way, 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 way easier to do it than trying to solve it for everything on the internet and figure out what every page the customer possibly could be looking at could be. So I think that was a really good indication that we found what's called product market fit once we had our value aligned with the motivations for solving the problem. Yeah.
Okay, guys. So this will be the last question from the audience, or these last two, and then we'll call it.
Just curious, how does your company generate profits?
It's a volume-based SaaS license fee. So we charge you a flat fee for the year based on how many times you call our API and how many products we process for you.
This is to the retailer.
To the retailer. Yeah.
That's a good question. Interesting. Yeah.
After graduating from grad school and starting working at the company, I don't remember the name.
Univision.
You still had the idea that you started during the first year of your grad school. Were you not scared or concerned that someone else could build that actual product? And was it one of the reasons that brought you back to that idea?
It was one of the reasons that kept me from doing it for a long time, I think. I was more concerned about competitors for a long time than I should have been. Even beyond that, even after I started the company, I was constantly she's building something similar. And so I joined this program. It was this free startup accelerator, which you didn't have to apply to, and they didn't take anything from you, which is probably a good indication of the quality level. It was run by the city of New York. And it was fine. It was the very first thing I did. I quit my job and I was I'm going to learn how to start a company. And I met this girl who had a startup that was it would give you a stylist, basically. It was called OK My Outfit. And she ended up being one of my longest term startup friends. She's a VC now. And I was really mean to her at first because I was you're a competitor. And it was our companies were so new, we didn't know where these things were going to go and how they were going to be different and whatever, that it was really stupid to worry about that. And I'm still shocked that nobody has woken up to what we've woken up to. And that's why being in a new category and creating a category that starts with a problem that no one is seeing is so important. Because if I was trying to be another personalization company or visual search or something adjacent or something that's already been defined, you have to be so much more paranoid about your competition. And I think it was not that I'm the hugest fan of him, but Peter Thiel in 0 to 1 talks about monopolies, and if you have no competition, you're running away with the market. You get 90% or 80% of the profits in the industry that you've defined. That's a much better place to be in than trying to carve out 5% market share in a really crowded marketplace. So I think it depends on what you're trying to build. And if I had had that realization a lot earlier, I probably would have lost less sleep at night over competition, because all the people I thought were competitors ended up totally not being, and the people that I actually had to worry about were these kind of perceived competitors, and I'm that's not even who, we don't play in the same space, and that's the focus that I have to have now, is educating the market on why those things are different. Yeah.
So I have one last question for you, which is that when you're our last founder, that for our speaker series here. And I guess what would be great to hear is when you want to start your company, you receive feedback from friends, from family, from mentors, from people you know. How did you decide who to listen to?
I'm trying to remember back that far. It's like a lot of stuff has happened since then. Well, first of all, like I said, if you're starting a company, hopefully it's new and no one has done it before, which means they don't know any better than you do. So my rubric that I've created over like many years, I don't think I employed this early on. I probably tried to listen to everyone and gave myself what they call mentor whiplash, where you're like trying to listen to them, and you end up with whiplash. Is that, you know, anyone who approaches like advice as you should X, I just stop listening. I literally I can't, I don't listen. If they phrase it as a question, have you thought about X? Or could you do Y? Or when I was at XYZ company, which is obviously different, I had a potentially similar situation and this is how it played out. And then they're kind of offering it up like, all right, I clearly don't know the answer because what you're doing is novel and no one knows the answer. But here's something that's parallel that could maybe help. And it's up to you as a founder or entrepreneur to like map that over. But there's all these like, I don't know, excuse the expression, but like people who want to swing their dick around and they don't have any business doing that. Like if you haven't recognized yet that your guess is as good as anyone else's in this crazy ecosystem where there's just so much risk and so much more noise than signal, then like you really are kind of, you're going to lead people down the wrong path in a really dangerous way, especially so early on when founders are so vulnerable. You're just starting out and everyone feels like they know more than you and you're trying to get as many coffee chats and whatever, which you should do. But if anyone's giving you the shoulds and acting like they've solved this, run away. Just politely nod and smile and then never take that person seriously or ask for their advice again. And then pay attention to the people who are like really good and whose predictions come true and whose advice you value and like make a list of those people and those are your go-to people.
Yeah, this is completely separate, but I would also be very wary of the pointless coffee, which a lot of people are huge fans of. Let me connect you with so-and-so for no reason at all. I think a lot of people, when you talk about like being an entrepreneur starting this, people always want to connect you with somebody for no purpose at all. I swear to God.
I think some of that's helpful, actually. Like early on, now I feel like I don't have time in my brain for that. But like when you're feeling around your way in the dark, like connecting someone, I connected Sean, our friend's husband, who works in like food startup world, with someone who was starting a food startup company. Like that, I don't know what purpose that served. There wasn't a more concrete reason than, hey, this guy worked in food and you work in food. But like, you kind of like throw out names of people. It just gives you like leads to follow. And I think in the early stage it's kind of like the creative process, right? It's like brainstorming, right? You want you're in this kind of like divergent thinking stage for the first few, I don't know, hours or whatever of your creative process. We're trying to come up with as many ideas as you can, and then you're in the convergent stage where you're narrowing those things down. So when you're in the divergent stage of your journey, like follow those leads. Don't kill yourself. Don't feel like guilty for not saying yes to this or that. Like, manage your life, but follow those random things, and you don't know where they're going to lead you and what ideas they're going to spark, but then recognize when it's time to switch over.
Okay, guys, I think we're going to end here. Let's give a big hand to Michelle.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much, Michelle, for coming. Okay, so if you have questions, we'll end a few minutes early. Well, we went right to the end. But okay, thank you, guys. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Oh.